A lever consists of a bar or plank and a pivot point or fulcrum. Work is performed by the bar, which swings at the pivot point to redirect the force. So basically there's three components to a lever. We have force, which we will abbreviate as capital F, and then we have the fulcrum, or pivot point. Now, so we don't have two F's, we're going to abbreviate this as PP. And then finally we have weight, which we'll abbreviate this as capital W. Now those are the main three components. Now there's also a bar, and the work is performed by the bar. So the easiest way for me to illustrate this is through the example of a seesaw. So we have a seesaw. We have something in the middle it's balancing on. Over here, force is applied, which I'm going to abbreviate as F. So here's the pivot point. And then over here is the weight. Now this right here, this board, is what we'd call the bar. And so work is performed by the bar, which swings at the pivot point. It swings right here to redirect the force. So the force is pushed down here, but the pivot point allows that force to be applied over here to push the weight up. Now there's three different types of lever. There's first class lever, second class, and third class. And so the different types of levers depend on the order of these three components: force, pivot point, and weight. So a seesaw happens to be a first class lever. So the first class lever is when you have the pivot point between the force and the weight. Now another word for weight is resistance. Another word for force is effort. So there's lots of different words that can be used here that can be interchangeable. So some other examples of a first class lever in addition to a seesaw would be something like balances, nail extractors, or scissors. Now with a second class lever, the weight is between the force and pivot point. So the easiest way to illustrate these types of levers is through a seesaw, because when we start using examples like nail extractors are a type of first class lever, it's hard to really imagine what that looks like in the placement of force, pivot point, and weight. So I'm going to rearrange our seesaw here to be a second class lever. So we would have force over here, but we'd switch weight and pivot point. So we'd have the weight in the middle, and then we'd have the pivot point over here. Now that seesaw wouldn't work really well. I wouldn't recommend getting on it. So there's not actually a seesaw that's an example of a second class lever. Instead we have the wheelbarrow. So I'm going to do my best to draw a wheelbarrow here. So we have the wheel here, and then we have the handles. So the wheel, of course, is going to be the pivot point. Then we're going to have the weight, and here the load. And then over here we're going to have the force, because whoever's pushing the wheelbarrow is going to be picking up over here. So here we have the weight between the force and the pivot point. So that's an example of a second class lever, as is something like pry bars, bottle openers, or nut crackers. And then finally we go to the third class lever. So again, if I rearrange my seesaw, we'll find that the weight is over here, the force is over here, and the pivot point is down here. So the pivot point stayed in the same place, but force and weight switched places. Now again, the seesaw wouldn't really work, and so I'm going to use a baseball bat as an example of a third class lever. Now we should never say that a third class lever is when you have weight, then force, then pivot point. Instead we should say that the force comes between the weight and the pivot point, because really you could switch these or turn this around and it would still work exactly the same. In the same way, a second class lever is when when weight is between force and pivot point, and a first class lever is when pivot point is in the middle. So these types of levers are defined by what's in the middle. So now we're going to draw a baseball bat. Again, excuse my drawing. So over here we have weight. Now really the ball touching the bat is not really weight, but it's the resistance, so bear with me there. And then over here we have the force, because that's where the hands are. And then right here down at the end is where we have the pivot point. So notice that force is in the middle, so it's a third class lever. Some other examples are fishing rods, hammers, and tweezers. So that's a look at the 3 types of levers. Now, a lever is one of the 6 types of simple machines, which uses a concept called mechanical advantage to make work easier.
To find out more about how to ace your test and get more practice for your test, click the study guide. Learn why Mometrix is the best and smartest decision you can make for your test prep choice. We have done all the work cutting through the fluff to give you what you need to perform well on your exam. Click the study guide to get started now, and thank you for watching and learning with us.